Self-Evident is a podcast that is dedicated to speaking truths that were once self-evident and doing so in love. Hail and well met. My name is Kenna Rose, and with me are
Alyssa
and Jenna.
And I am so excited to be back for Self-Evident. It's my spring break.
Yes, and my goodness, you've not been breaking or springing at all. It's just been go, go, go for you nonstop.
You know when you're just kind of running on adrenaline because you don't have time to think?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think that adding things to my spring break was going to be that big of a deal.
Maybe spring break is meant to be a break.
Maybe that's why they call it spring break.
Yeah. Oh. Wow. Novel thought.
Kenna.
Wow. It's like my whole life I have to reevaluate.
So anyways, Kenna is just always on the go, always moving, always busy. Her entire life is made up of like serving Christ as fast as she could possibly go without leaving time for her to rest, which is problematic. I'm sorry. I'm actually doing so much better than you are because if you've not been home like this entire break, like that's a little sketchy.
But you're always doing something. Anyway, today's episode, we wanted to talk about some of the things that are going on with the Department of Education, and then just an article that showed up in the Wall Street Journal about homeschooling, and then HB 2827 or 2827, which is a bill in the Illinois legislature currently that has got some shifty things towards homeschooling.
That's right.
That we want to talk about.
There's a lot of different news pieces that have been coming out about education in general in America, specifically two of them geared towards here in Illinois. And I know Alyssa, you covered this past Monday, actually, with your episode, all about what happened at the Deerfield Middle School.
Right.
Is that
yes.
correct? And can you just give us a brief summary of what happened?
Yeah, so Deerfield Middle School is in School District 109, and they recently had a big scandal following them that the administrators there, Joanna Ford, I know is one name, and I think the principal is, oh goodness, I can't remember her name, and I have no problem naming names when it comes to these things. People need to know their names, especially parents that are in this district. You need to know exactly who is doing this to your children if you have kids in the school district. And what the administrators did, unfortunately, is eventually things escalated to the point where they forced girls to take their clothes off in front of a boy who identified as a girl because
they actually have school administrators.
They had school administrators watching to make sure that they included
complied.
him. Made him feel like one of the gals and take their clothes off. So one of the moms, Nicole Georges, has been going national with this. She filed complaints. She's filed things with the Department of Education, basically saying that the school district has not been in cooperation with Trump's executive order, which is completely true.
Right.
Yeah. So she's pursuing legal action with that. So yeah, we covered that on Monday. There's a lot of details that I went into of specifically what happened in the locker room. So you're going to want to go watch that or listen to it on audio platforms.
Yeah.
So
it's a good episode. Check it out. But one of the really big things that's been in the news recently is Trump's executive order regarding the Department of Education.
Yeah.
And that's led to a lot of conversations where one's like, what does the Department of Education actually do? Because I was doing some research on this, because you always hear about it, and you hear it tied to teachers' unions, and you hear it has tons and tons of money it's dealing with, and yet nobody really seems to know what it quite actually does. I was looking on their website to see if maybe they give their mission on their website. It is the most conflated use of like 10 words where you could have used 2 to say like absolutely nothing.
Oh boy. Give us an example.
It's like when you're trying to reach a word count in
an
an essay and you just keep saying a bunch of stuff that doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
That's where students get it. Okay.
It was
Department of Education.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It educates you on how to write your 500-word essay.
Exactly. But it's like, where is it? Talking about their mission. Oh, the other thing is it is link after link after link. It's like you have a page where they talk about the policies and you can click like, higher ed, and then it sends you to like 5 more links where you have to go into these specific, and it never actually tells you what they do.
But let's be honest, every government website is like that. So
before the Trump administration.
I'm thinking particularly the IRS right now because my husband owns a business, and doing business taxes around the tax year is such a headache. And when you go to the IRS to say, can you just give me like a 1099 form for a subcontractor? You have to, like Kenna was saying, there's so many links, then it takes you to another page and there's more links. I'm like, dude,
wow,
just show me the form.
Right? Especially since some of them overlap. And
they do. Or how to fill out this certain form. And then you go to the page and it's supposed to have this step by step, but then it takes you to another link. So I feel like every government website is meant to be a little tricky.
I think it's just they
just
want
how
to
it
get
is.
you so confused that when they finally offer to help, you're actually relieved to see the government.
That is a theory. Oh, the government's here to help.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't find their about page anymore. I've lost it.
Well,
That is
actually,
funny.
speaking of different government websites, it reminds me, Brett Baer did an interview with some of the top people in the Department of Government Efficiency. And one of them brought up that in order to retire from the government, you have to go through a mountain, and a literal mountain of paperwork to be able to retire, because they had no forms about retirement online. They were still using the system from 1950, where they stored all of these retirement documents in a literal mine.
Yes, I remember.
Did you hear
Yes,
about this?
I saw that.
Like, when I was listening to this, I was like, are you kidding me? We're
It was
storing
giving-
government documents in a mine?
It was giving Harry Potter Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Mines of Moria.
But, like,
if you want to
twisted.
retire, you have to traverse.
Just
Moria.
traverse down
And
into
so
the depths.
I think it's the co-founder of Airbnb, he was put in charge of like putting this onto online documents. He's like, I have over 222,000 documents to go through because they've never put a single document online. It's all in the mines.
Honestly, that's kind of embarrassing.
I know.
Also, how wild is it to like seriously say it's all in the mines?
Yeah, and another thing, the person who was in charge of this said that in order to retire from the government, you literally need to go through a crash training course on how to retire from the government, because they've been still using all of the systems and regulations and protocols from the 1950s.
Imagine you just
That
hit
is so
65
embarrassing.
and you're
You're
like,
like,
all
I just
right,
wanna
I'm ready to
retire.
retire. And they're like, but wait, you need to take a class on how to retire. You're like, wait, what?
Can I just go die? I'm just going to go die real quick.
I didn't realize I
Well,
had to go back to
efficient.
school to retire. It's crazy.
Yeah, anyways, that's a
That
whole
is-
different rabbit trail.
That is wild. Oh man. But anyway, from what I've sort of been able to tell, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the Department of Education mostly handles, like, it gives grants to schools and then
Yes.
it helps enforce policy, like
Yes.
basically saying we'll take your federal funding if you don't comply with this.
X, Y, and Z.
Correct. So the Department of Education has a list of requirements that you have to meet, which I would love to see that list because I can't find it.
Yeah,
If
that would be-
anyone can find it, that would be great. But
Please
if
send
you
it to us.
don't
I'd love
comply,
to see
then
what
you
it
lose
is.
out on federal funding. And the federal funding is in the form of grants.
Okay.
You don't need to pay it back. But our taxpayer dollars are able to fund those grants. So this is why Department of Education has been such a stickler for homeschooling families, for private school families for such a long time. And the public school system in general, because I'm not using the public school system. I don't think I should have to pay
Right.
into the education system. I think there should be an opt-out program.
Yeah.
That would be a policy that I would love to see implemented in my state. But it won't be implemented. I can guarantee that.
Why?
We're in the big blue state of Illinois. But I think it's important to go back, and we've actually referenced this on past episodes of the original intent of the Department of Education. And originally, it was part of President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty,
Right.
where he was trying to give opportunities and make things equal when it came to education for minorities, for people who are disabled, so that they would have the same equal opportunities to get a good education. So that was the original intent, which originally I think it was a good intention to try to level the playing field, make sure kids got into a good system and they learned history and reading and writing and arithmetic, all the R's. However, it quickly divulged into growing way too big. I would have to have a history person explain, but
Yeah.
I don't think Lyndon Johnson intended it to grow so big. I could be wrong about that, though.
According to Brett Cooper, I think the initial government funding that they were given was around $14 billion. And it has conflated over the years to, I think it was over $240 billion.
Well, in the 1860s, it was originally $15,000.
In the 1860s?
1860s, when they had their first little mini department.
That's crazy.
But then, 1965, Office of Education had more than 2,100 employees and a budget of $1.5 billion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Calvin Lindstrom wrote an article for IFI, and he said in 2024 the budget was $6.75 trillion.
I just can't conflate that number in my head.
That's a lot of money.
Know. That's a lot of zeros.
It's a lot of zeros.
Yeah. So it has just kept getting bigger. Kind of
It just keeps getting bigger. Yeah.
And another one of the things that really is concerning, like what Alyssa was saying, is where is this money going?
Yes.
Where is the list of things you guys are accomplishing with all of this money?
Or the requirements you have to meet.
Right, because all of the proficiency standards across the U.S. have just been plummeting. And if you guys are getting more money in order to fund schools, shouldn't they be getting better? I thought throwing money at a problem always solved it.
Exactly.
I guess I'm wrong.
Right.
Facts.
But it's a cabinet level position too.
Yeah.
So when Trump signed the executive order, so I think it was technically established by Congress, which means that Trump can't technically
completely disband it. He can loosen all of the holds that it has. He can kind of, I don't want to say disband it, that's not the correct word, but he can begin the process of dismantling the Department of Education, but only Congress can officially be like, yes, you are you no longer exist.
Right. So I think the executive order he published to the White House website said he basically said it's the Secretary of Education should take the steps to start closing it as much as they can by law, and then also making sure that the funds given to schools by the Department of Education is in compliance with law and policy, which I love this so much. It says, quote, including the requirement that any program or activity receiving federal assistance terminate illegal discrimination obscured under the label diversity, equity, and inclusion, or similar terms and programs promoting gender ideology. Which is kind of encouraging.
Yeah. It reminds me of our conversation. Alyssa and I were on the radio this morning, and one of the topics was talking about how Planned Parenthood is going to be defunded of $20 million U.S. federal dollars, which is amazing.
Yay.
But putting it into perspective of how much was it? Was it like almost 700?
It was, almost 700 million.
700 million that it's still getting from the U.S. government.
Yours truly.
It's like, wow. But that was the reason that $20 million was taken away, because of the DEI initiatives that Planned Parenthood is still doing. And Trump's like, yeah, that kind of breaks the policies that I have put in place. So that's the reason he was able to defund it.
And the flip side of that is that if Planned Parenthood then puts themselves in step with abolishing DEI policies, they can technically be better qualified to receive that money back. So it's not an official, you are completely defunded of ever having these funds ever again. It's kind of a...
Do this and you'll have that.
Right, exactly. So I'm not trying to, like I said on radio this morning, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but it's not a permanent defunding.
Well, it's good to know those things too, because sometimes when we feel like we're winning, we do less to actually make
Exactly. Well, for example, the main schools that Trump was stripping federal funding of because of their keeping men out of women's spaces issues that they were having, they then fell in line and they received the funding back. Okay. So, again, it's not as if Planned Parenthood or Department of Education, whichever means that they get, if they do fall in line, they can be requalified to receive those funds.
Right.
So
here's to sincerely hoping that Planned Parenthood sticks to its evil ideologies.
I hope so. I hope they dig their heels in with their DEI so they don't get that money. That'd be great.
Never thought I'd be saying that. Never thought we'd be saying that. I really hope they stick to that. But, yeah. So I know that would mean the Department of Education's had to move some of their programs. So according to Epic Times, student loan processing is moving to Small Business Administration, and then funding and programming for students with special needs is moved to the Department of Health and Human Services. So,
Which, actually, that makes sense that it
Yeah.
would move there.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, it does make
So
sense.
why is it a good thing that the Department of Education is in the process of being disbanded?
It's bloated bureaucrat that hasn't done much. I said all of those words wrong.
A bloated bureaucrat.
Bureaucrat. There we
Yes.
go. I'm just gonna blame it on being slightly
I
stuffy,
was actually very proud of this. The other day, someone was like, "Well, what's the opposite of a complementarian?" And the person she had asked it to, she was like, "It's like an eagle, but I don't remember like how to say it." I'm like, egalitarian, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, how'd you know it?" And I'm just like, "Yeah,
You're just so
that's
smart.
me."
That's amazing. That is amazing. It's good that it's being dismantled because nobody knows where that money is actually going.
Right.
They're spending a lot of time, or at least they were spending a lot of time, trying to enforce gender ideology and like critical race theory and Marxism in classrooms in disguised ways. And
Right.
then also, they haven't actually done anything to help students' reading or math scores. It's gone down since
Right.
they
Mhm.
started.
yeah, they were originally meant to promote academic excellence and equal access to education for anyone, regardless of your status, regardless of your background. You all had the same access to education, which again, in theory, sounds good, but they failed to do this. If you remember the National Assessment of Education Progress, that report card came out specifically for the state of Illinois. Math scores for 8th graders, 4th graders went down. Reading scores for those grades went down. Illinois in general has a proficiency rate of ELA, which is English Language Arts, 32%.
Ooh.
So
LOL.
70% of Illinois public school kids can't read at grade level. And then for math, it's 29%,
That's
which is horrible. I mean, those are our supposed future engineers and scientists and doctors and nurses, and they can't do math. Over 70% of them can't do math.
We just need to throw more money at the problem, I think.
Right.
yeah.
Throw more
reinstate
money.
Department
That
of
seems
Education,
to work.
actually.
But in addition to what you were saying, that they failed with the gender ideology and all these things, I read this on one of our previous episodes, but I think it'd be worth reading this again. This is one of the books that 4th graders in Illinois are learning in public schools today as we speak about transgenderism. So this is what the book says. You might feel like a boy. You might feel like a girl. You might feel like both boy and girl, or like neither. You might feel like your gender changed from day to day or from year to year. So that's their 4th grade education in gender theory.
No wonder they're having a hard time with math and reading.
And
Well, if they can't deal with
transgenderism.
biology, that's like...
None of that made sense.
And we wonder why our kids are struggling with depression and anxiety. We were talking
Yeah.
about this on radio this morning. Depression and anxiety are at all-time highs for kids in public school. And so one of the public school solutions is, hey, let's give these kids an online chatbot counselor with the people on the other side.
Who are monitoring 15
Who are
to 25 chats at
monitoring.
once.
20-something-year-olds that have no formal training are not licensed, which if you're licensed in the state of Illinois, you have to put yourself under standards that as a Christian you would just not be able to do. So one could argue that you don't necessarily want to be licensed as a therapist in the state of Illinois, but they're not licensed. They don't have any formal training. They're just there because they're closer in age and they can relate better
That
to the
and
kids.
the company
Yeah.
verbatim said that they're the cheapest option as well. So that's
Love
why they
that.
have
Wow.
Cheap
college
labor.
students.
Sounds
Yeah.
like they care so much for these kids.
So much.
But
It's
no.
so sweet.
You know, and I know this is going way off topic, but there is sort of that problem with the anxiety and depression in schools. And I know I was talking to my youth pastor from a while back because I was interviewing him for an assignment for school.
Yeah.
For something I was writing. And he was saying that it's really interesting because a lot of the kids he's seeing in youth group are a couple grades behind in terms of emotional maturity.
Wow.
In terms of just across the board. And part of it has to do with screens and just the way
Yeah.
the culture is so focused on the self in such a negative way. I don't know, something you said reminded me of what Alyssa Stuckey says, where she says the self can't be both our problem and solution. So if the
Yeah.
self is the source of depression or despair, insecurity, fear, it can't also be the source of ultimate fulfillment. And I'm sort of starting to paraphrase, but she just basically sums it up with, we need Jesus. because that's the only thing that can really
Absolutely.
Yeah, we
fix
were
that.
also talking about the emotional maturity levels with Rebecca Leland in our last
Mhm.
podcast
Yes.
that we did with her, which I hope it's up at this point because we've had such horrible problems with the filming of this that, like, the podcasts are out. Go listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. But at the same time, it's like, how are we not being able to get on YouTube? Anyways. So, we talked about this with Rebecca Leland about emotional immaturity in men. And she noted that where her father was at age 20, she's finally starting to see men when they reach age 30 reach the maturity level of her father when he was 10 years younger than them.
Mhm.
So it just seems like we're a whole decade behind actual maturity levels in this generation and in the millennial generation, which is wow.
I know some of it does genuinely have to do with having screens and from such a young age.
Oh, absolutely. But at the same time, I think the biggest component with, because every culture has their struggles, every
Yes.
culture has your barriers that you need to overcome. So
Same thing,
I don't
just
think it would be
repackaged.
right. I don't think it'd be wise to say, oh, it's the screen's fault, and we only package it as that problem, as if technology is this big evil that we need to get rid of, because technology is neither good nor bad. It's an
Right.
inanimate thing. It doesn't have a soul. There's no morality to it. It's what humans do with it that makes it good or bad, which is why there's certain sites you don't go on, there's certain websites you don't go on, certain apps you don't use. It's not because of technology in general, it's because of what those things have been
The
created
signature. Well,
for.
If tech is an amplifier, then
Exactly.
it amplifies human nature.
Right. So I think at the heart of all these things is we have a lack of parents that are involved in their children's life. Especially in American culture, we outsource a lot. We outsource with daycare.
Yeah.
We outsource with schooling. Not saying that if you send your kids to a school that's necessarily in and of itself a bad thing.
Right.
But if you're not involved in your kids' education, that is a bad thing. You can still send your kids to a school and be involved in their education.
Yeah.
Right.
You as a parent are the primary educator. The teacher, if you are not the teacher, if you're outsourcing that, the teacher is meant to supplement and reinforce what they're learning at home. They're not meant to take your place as the primary educator of your kids.
Well,
True.
Speaking of that, though, let's pivot real quickly to talk about the homeschool bill that's here in
Okay,
Illinois,
yes.
Yes.
2827, because I have a story about that.
Oh, okay.
So I've been to the Capitol twice in March.
Look at
due
you,
to
little patriot.
Yeah.
The lobby day that Illinois Christian Home Educators has thrown. They throw it every single
Cherry
year.
Pie
They call
Day,
it
right?
Cherry Pie Day, where homeschoolers go and they deliver cherry pies to our lawmakers just to thank them for keeping homeschooling free
Every time
in
I
Illinois up
Sorry.
to this point.
every time I try to explain what Cherry Pie Day is to someone who's not from Illinois or who wasn't homeschooled,
I get a big
feel like-
question mark on the face.
See, I feel
I
like
just
I'm
see
sharing
the
a
question.
myth.
Just what are you talking about, Cherry Pie Day?
It feels like I'm sharing a myth or like lore dropping.
Yes.
like,
Yeah,
ancient
they're like,
Greek
they ain't no
mythology.
way
Or-
that's
or I'm-
real.
I'm
You
sharing
bribe
it-
lawmakers with sugar?
I'm sharing a
What?
conspiracy theory. There's Cherry Pie Day.
Yeah.
Thousands of homeschoolers descend on the Capitol. They're like, what? There's that many?
Okay, but actually, I don't think lawmakers understood maybe how many homeschoolers there are in the state
Yeah.
of Illinois.
Hence why they wanted to register them, because, what you don't know scares you. So HB 2827 would require homeschoolers to register with the state and basically file all of their kids to the government saying like, hey, I'm homeschooling these kids. And if you're not compliant, you're going to spend either 30 days in jail, you're going to be fined, and there are rumors of your kids might have your kids be taken away from you.
DCFS
Yeah.
visits could be in the future with this.
Yeah. And the reason that homeschoolers are so adamantly against this is not because we are hiding abuse. That is not the reason. The reason is it's government overreach.
Yep.
Families are supposed to be in charge of their children, not the government. And
Absolutely.
just the mere thought of opening that Pandora's box to allow the Illinois to start making regulations and laws for homeschoolers to start following, it's just going to be one step after another
Yep.
step after another step. They're not going to stop.
Well,
We've seen this happen in multiple states.
It's because there's an entire disconnect on the way this is even being looked at. 'Cause
Right.
it's like the majority of homeschoolers are Christian conservatives who believes that it's from Christ come all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, and believe that parents, God created the family as the safe space to raise and teach and grow kids, and that it's parents' jobs to teach them. And the worldview of many of the people who are for this bill is that no, the government should own your kids. No, this progressive secular ideology should be what they're being taught. It's entirely a difference in worldview.
Yeah, what you just said hit, I think, the most important point, that this bill is less about, oh, we want to keep kids safe. It's more about who owns your children. Mm-hmm. Is it you as the parent, or is it the government? And with what we've seen with communistic ideals, with Marxist ideals that have infiltrated American government, we have a lot of people that ascribe to the idea that actually the state owns the children because we want the children to eventually serve the state. And Latasha Fields, who has been outspoken against House Bill 2827, was recently on the news talking about this, how this bill is formulated in a way that turns the government into the parents. Yes. Now the government has the responsibility to look inside everyone's little window and make sure everyone's okay and you're following the rules. So this is what that is for. And what Christians would say is absolutely not. They are my children, given to me by God. You have no right, like your dad was saying when he was on Fox News, the government has no right to come into my home and tell me how to raise my family, tell my wife how to raise my family, tell my children how they need to be raised. That is egregious overreach of how God designed government to be.
Mm-hmm. If it really were for the benefit of kids, they would be focusing on why public schools aren't teaching kids to read or do math.
And also how 1 in 10 kids in Illinois public schools have been sexually abused by a staffer.
Which is actually horrifying.
Yes.
The reason that this bill was actually introduced was because there were some cases of neglect and abuse that were found in certain homeschool families, and so
that claimed to be homeschool families.
That's correct. Yeah. And actually, Awake Illinois, which they've been doing some really great coverage on this, they found recently one of the co-founders of CRHE, which is the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. This organization provided the template for HB 2827 in Illinois. And do you want to know what one of the co-founders, basically her life story? Kyrian Darkwater, they/them, is a trans-mask, non-binary artist and organizer who grew up trained to fight in the culture war, that's quotation marked, as the eldest daughter in a quiverful, homeschooling, Christian nationalist family. Kyrian uses their former insider knowledge to co-produce the Kitchen Table Cult podcast with Eve Ettinger, explaining the roots behind the organizing of the religious right in the U.S. politics. So they have been promoting HB 2827 to all of their followers, making sure that everybody is following it and promoting it as much as humanly possible. But Kyrian claims that she was an educationally deprived homeschooled student who spent more time raising her 7 siblings than studying. And so she is passionate about making sure that homeschooling education, well, what she says is accountability in home education, but really what she wants is basically the eradication of it.
Well, it sounds like, too, she was disillusioned with a lot of what she was being taught and went way over to the other side. Yeah. And now she wants to make sure nobody else is being taught what she calls Christian nationalist principles.
Right. And so I just want people to be aware, like, that is the type of person that is behind this bill. Mm-hmm. Someone who has a lot of bitterness built up in them, a lot of resentment against their family. Because, well, I come from a family of 8 kids, and I love spending as much time as humanly possible with my younger siblings. It's all a perspective, and I'm sure everybody has their different experiences with their families and different, like, of course, sometimes, you know, you feel like you may have too much put on your plate and family responsibilities, but at the end of the day, that is your family. You know, God put you in that family to serve and to love and to encourage. So at the end of the day, it's not your parents' fault that you can pitch in every once in a while, maybe do the dishwasher, do something like that. But I'm not going to speak to that because I don't know her story. I don't know her education or her background, because she may have some validation in that, you know? I don't know her family. I don't know her education experience. So I'm not going to speak to that. But in general, that is not something that you should get better at.
Right. No. Well, and all that to say, it's like you were saying, it is possible that there are some people who have gone through experiences like that where it was really just the worst form of what's called homeschooling, where it's no education, yeah, just awful. But in general, that's not what
No.
it is. And homeschooling is used as a scapegoat for a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Which reminds me of an article that was in the Wall Street Journal that's kind of been making its rounds in media. I know Albert Mueller talked about it, and I think it was talked about a couple other places, where it was kind of just talking about how often whenever there's a tragedy, it's blamed on homeschooling. And it brought up the recent story about a 32-year-old man from, I think it was Waterbury, Connecticut, who was found, who was released from captivity, where he was allegedly claimed he was kept captive by his stepmother. And it was blamed on homeschooling, like, oh, the family said they were going to homeschool him. Which, again, the same thing happened with the Sandy Hook shooter, where it was claimed that, and the article was saying, well, it was claimed that he had been homeschooled. But in both those cases, it was like they actually were in school, and they both, like with the Sandy Hook shooter, his mental instability had been well documented in school, and they didn't really do anything. And also in the Connecticut case, he actually did have a welfare check, and they never showed back up after the check to check in on him. So it's like homeschooling is just used as a scapegoat was the point of the article. And so maybe there's ideological reasons behind why homeschool is vilified, and not actually safety of children.
Yeah.
Well, and what you were just saying with House Bill 2827 specifically, the families that were held up as the scapegoat, like Kenna was saying, for homeschooling, those kids were already in the DCFS system.
Right.
There were already cases against the parents for abuse. So actually, I forget who I was listening to. I can't remember if it was Latasha Fields, but it was a failure on the government's part to check in on those kids.
Wow.
Not because of homeschooling. They were already in the DCFS system. So.
Yeah.
I also wanted to go back to your point, though, about it's being the government's job, or basically it's not the school's job to raise your children.
Right.
I had a very fascinating conversation with a very passionate, fiery young homeschooling mom when I was last in Springfield on March 19th. And she was telling me the story of why she pulled her son out. I'm like, well, how long have you been homeschooling? She's like, I've been homeschooling since September. I'm like,
oh,
wow, that's actually pretty impressive. What made you decide to become a homeschooling mom? And she said because of the experiences at their school, her son was acting out, and the teachers were rewarding his behavior by giving him pizza, by giving him treats.
To keep him quiet and calm him down.
Basically, but also when she went to confront these teachers, and she's like, excuse me, my son is not going to learn how to treat authorities and come home and treat me that way. I'm disciplining him. He's not supposed to do that. I don't want you teaching my son to disrespect authority. And they told her, well, it's your job to be the bad guy at home. We're supposed to be the good guys in your son's life. So she got very, very concerned and was like, wait 1 second. No, you do not say that about me. Like, I'm not the bad guy in my son's life, but you're supposed to be backing me up. And they're like, no, we're not. And there was a shooting scare at her son's school.
Oh, man.
Where when she went in to go get her son, the teachers wouldn't let her in, I think, past the front desk. Because, like, no, we don't know. We're going to keep your son safe. You're not allowed to see him until, like, we're ready to let you see him. And she's like, no, I'm his mother. I get to decide when I see him and when I don't.
Yeah.
So there were a few other stories that she told me, but just basically what you were saying about, the teacher's supposed to back the family up. Well, certain public schools are basically telling families, no, we're going to treat your child to make us look like the good guys in their eyes and make you look like the villain.
Right.
And then again, it goes back to okay, well, then who do children belong to?
Yeah,
exactly.
Is it the government or is it their parents? And there's a full, huge worldview divide between people who are for homeschooling and people who want to vilify it.
So true.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to say anything else?
Sure. Well, real quickly, I do want to say about the homeschool bill, it was very encouraging to see how many homeschoolers did show up, because being there in the Capitol, there was anywhere between 6,000 to 8,000 homeschoolers
that is incredible.
Showed up for the hearing itself.
That is so incredible.
And at one point, I was locked out of the Capitol
Oh,
because they were
man.
not letting people back in. But the office was just like, well, you might want to go to Stratford and just go on underneath. Like, but I'm not telling you this. I'm like, okay, well, don't mind if I do. But it was wonderful. All of the Capitol police, all the Capitol staff were just in awe of how sweet and polite all of the
That is
homeschooling
incredible.
children are. We were singing Amazing Grace, the Star Spangled Banner. We were having a great time.
And that is how you do it.
Yeah, Fox News showed up and got everyone on camera. Everyone was smiling and waving their signs.
Someone said you showed up in the background of One
I
Shot,
did.
Jenna.
It was actually really funny because IFI's lobbyist, David Curtin, he was walking past us right at the moment as Fox was starting to record. And I tapped him on the shoulder and just hi, good to see you. And he turns around and he's like, oh my gosh, you're here. And he just gives me this giant hug. And that's right as the camera was going past. So you can see just David Curtin turning around and being like, whoa!
That's amazing.
That is incredible.
So it is encouraging. And unfortunately, even though it's now headed to the House floor, we have to, I think, turn 12 Democrats to vote no for this bill. And so we're just encouraging everybody, find your local representative.
And email them, contact them.
Call them. Call them. Calling is very, very important. It's very impactful. They keep tallies. It actually does sway votes. Just go to IllinoisFamily.org and click on Officials Finder. It's one of the super easiest ways to do that. And we also are encouraging people to contact the House Speaker, Chris Welch. And we'll link that in the description as well. But even if you can just send a voicemail, send an email, anything. It's making your voice heard.
Can people send things to the House Speaker if they're not from Illinois, or do they have to be from Illinois to let lawmakers know?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. I would encourage you to be from the state of Illinois if you're going to be contacting Illinois officials.
Well, that being said, when I was at the Capitol, homeschoolers from Iowa and Indiana were there lobbying against this bill.
Okay.
And when I was asking them about this, I'm like, hey, wait, what are you doing here? They said that this is basically the entire nation is watching what's going to happen in Illinois because this is going to set the precedent for other states set
So
legislation.
Which is wild because Illinois is so far left-leaning. It's not like it's even the average of the United States.
There's only 13 states in America, according to HSLDA, who do not regulate homeschooling, and Illinois is one of them.
True.
That's true.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe you wouldn't have to be from the state of Illinois then to contact.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if I can find it really fast.
And is there anything else we need to cover?
I think that's all.
Okay. I need a drink. Me too.
I'd let you drink from mine, but I don't want to get you sick.
I don't think
Oh, no. I was talking about boba. I need a drinky drink.
Oh, yes. We have to do that. I think you have to be from a state.
He wants to know if we want the chicken or steak.
It says you can write or call a legislator out of your jurisdiction, but it won't matter as much. This is basically Reddit. That doesn't count.
Well, Reddit
actually does have some really good advice, not gonna lie.
Like I said,
We're
I
not
think
advocating for Reddit.
I'm not saying it would be illegal if someone from out of state contacted Illinois officials.
I think it's just less impactful.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it would be necessary or worth it because they will just write you off completely.
Well, but it also shows how much of an impact this bill is going to be having nationwide.
Which could
being
show...
hey, I'm from Ohio,
I don't like what you're doing.
Yeah, please don't, because this is going to set a precedent for my state, and I would really prefer
so
staying in Ohio.
They'll get national backlash.
Yeah.
Not just...
In conclusion, follow your conscience.
Yes. Amen.
If your conscience is telling you, I need to contact those Illinois officials, just do it.
we had a whole debacle when we were all filing out witness slips where homeschoolers were contacting us being just so how young is too young to file a witness slip? Do you have to be voting age? And there's no laws or regulations. We scoured the Illinois government website. There was no age limit.
Not for witness slips.
Yeah,
no.
so ICHE was just
wild.
well, let's just do 13 and up because I don't know.
I heard
but
13.
I had my piano students. They're just oh yeah, she's 6. She'll file one. It's fine. And I'm like, okay.
Follow your conscience, I guess.
Same thing for emailing. It doesn't ask for any kind of
yeah
voter identification.
You're
or
a resident
age
of Illinois,
exactly.
So you get a say.
Yeah, that's so interesting that there's literally no restrictions on
I know.
Don't let them find out, or there will be next year.
Yeah, but in conclusion about this bill, I just want to say what Alyssa was saying about the case that was brought to the attention of Illinois, which has now put this bill into action about the abuse that goes on with homeschooling, etc. Even if that were the case, where if it was a straight down case of neglect and abuse in a homeschool family, hard cases should not make law. Just because
That's
it's
right.
happening on the fringe does not mean that is widespread throughout the majority of that community.
That's right.
That's such a
And
good point.
public schools specifically, like you pointed out, they should be the first ones on that priority list because guess what? They're run by the government. So they should take care of their own house before coming in and taking basically our rights away.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think that's a great way to end this episode. So without further ado, let us firmly rely on the protection of divine providence. This is self-evident.
Thank you